With the rise of handheld consoles in the 90s and 2000s, many felt it was only a matter of time until the wildly successful Super Mario Bros. Franchise would receive a worthy successor on a new mobile platform. Then finally, in May of 2006, the appropriately titled New Super Mario Bros. Was released on the Nintendo DS. What would follow would be the start of one of the most mind-blowing speedrunning histories of all time.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
Yes, I did it!
Yes!
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 How does it feel that like nobody will ever beat your own?
The early days of the game's speedrunning scene begin in an era when a website by the name of Speed Demos Archive was the predominant speedrunning forum, and on it, a thread for the game was created. As a result of how SDA works though, not many world records or even any single segment runs in general were completed. This is due to the fact that SDA only accepts runs that are high quality and have minimal mistakes. As a result, most of the thread was dedicated to finding small time saves in individual level strategies, with the goal of making a run for the any % category that SDA would accept. However, this doesn't mean that no runs were done though. A user named Slowbroke claimed to have beaten the game in 39 minutes and with about 5 deaths. While there's no video, he says he barely used the blue shell, an item new to the series that allows Mario to morph into a shell, giving him a sort of invincibility to enemies like Goombas and Koopas, with the trade-off of slightly slower movement speeds. He said he didn't use it much because he was crap with it, likely because of its difficult to control movement while morphed. Over the next few months, Australian runner Chronorox would bring down the record a couple of times by multiple minutes, with no lasting video proof, until August 16, 2006, when he would record a 24:31. With this run, let's go through the route that completes the game the fastest. Starting off, Chrono goes through 1-1 as fast as he can. Nothing really of note here. After that, he plays 1-2, which has this floating red item block hovering over it. The block starts off over 1-3 and has a 50% chance of either going to the left to 1-2 or to the right to 1 tower, or 1T for short. If it goes right, it's a reset, for reasons I'll explain shortly. Chrono starts 1-2 and the aforementioned block shows up in the stage, and has a chance of dropping either a 1-up, a blue shell, or a fire flower. He is hoping for a shell, as it is faster for some levels, gives him a lot of security as he can roll through enemies while in the shell, and is needed for the secret exit in 1T. No shell means a reset, and they only have a 3 out of 7 chance of dropping. This means that combined with the 50% chance of the block going to the left, 11 out of 14 runs will not make it past 1-2. Now, you could get a shell from the Toad House, but going there is a big time loss. After 1-2, he takes the secret exit in 1T, leading to a cannon that takes him to World 5. He plays through 5-1, takes the secret exit in 5-2, letting him skip the tower and go straight to 5-3, then takes the secret exit in the Ghost House, which allows him to travel to World 8. He plays through 8-1 and 8-2, and then enters 8T, where he does what's referred to as a quick kill on Bowser Jr. Normally, Bowser Jr. will jump back into a shell after hitting him the first time before you can hit him again. However, there is a 4-frame window where he can be hit before he does. Since it's pretty tight, Chrono jumps twice, acting as a setup to allow him to hit Jr. at the right time. Compared to the normal way of doing it, this saves about 5 to 10 seconds, and is one of the earliest strats still used to this day. After 8T, he plays through 8-3, which the shell makes significantly faster because of the increased swimming speed it provides. In 8-4, he takes an intentional hit at the end so that he can get a fire flower. While this does make killing enemies harder, it makes movement faster, as being in the shell's morph state slows Mario's speed down by a small amount. The flower is being collected for a section of the run that runners have deemed the Gauntlet, which is a bridged off section of World 8 that has levels 8-5 to the second tower. Its name comes from its notoriously difficult levels, specifically 8-6 and 8-7, and from the brutal RNG of 8-8. After Gauntlet is the final stage in the game, Bowser's Castle. The level is pretty straightforward, minus a trick called Bowser Jump at the end, which is when runners bounce off Bowser Jr.'s head in order to jump over Bowser and hit the button, essentially skipping the fight. Overall, the run had humble beginnings. Outside of some tricks here and there, it was all about optimizing movement in order to save time. So, with Chrono's 24:31 completed, combined with the fact that the game was still relatively new, there must have been a lot of excitement in the community, and runners ready to get their own world record. The 24:31 was quick, but there were a lot of improvements that could be made. So when would the next record be set? Well, it would only be 9 years until the next record was completed. So why the lack of records for so long? Well, there's likely a few reasons. Like I said before, Chronorox's record was really good for the time. Yeah, there were some mistakes, but overall, he produced a really solid run that SDA would have verified if not for low camera quality. Which brings me to my second point, the lack of recording options for the DS. You could get a capture card for around $65, but you had to install it yourself. And while it isn't overly complicated, it's enough of a process to turn some people away from the idea. Also, any modifications of any kind voids Nintendo's warranty, so that may have contributed to scaring people away. And as you can see, using a camera back in the 2000s to record produces a very low quality video, and also meant that you had to keep your DS in one spot and had to set up a camera in a very specific way, possibly needing a tripod or other equipment. While the process of recording a DS is much easier now with modern equipment, it was definitely not that way for a long time. Point is, it's likely no coincidence that the first world record since 2006 was done only a few months after NSMB came out on the Wii U Virtual Console. So, on August 21st, 2015, a runner that goes by the name eWaller, who was well known for previously holding many world records across various new Super Mario Bros. Games, would complete a run of his own in 24:28, beating Chrono's time by a total of 3 seconds. While there were some small movement time saves here and there, some new strategies were also implemented that have been developed over the past 9 years. The first notable one is called unmorphing. As I said before, Shell Mario's main perk is its morph state, where you can body enemies. The downside is that Mario's max speed is reduced to about 90%. This means runners would ideally take every opportunity possible to exit the morph state to gain small amounts of time over the entirety of the run that add up quickly. In most cases, these opportunities are in the air while in the middle of a jump. The second notable new strat is turning before hitting the flagpole at the end of levels. Every time Mario jumps on the flagpole, an animation plays of him sliding down, turning, jumping off, then exiting the level. By turning before hitting the flagpole, you save time by skipping the part of the animation where Mario turns. Over the course of a run, this can save about 3.8 seconds altogether. The third and final major new strat implemented in this run is called Death Warp. Level 8T2 is essentially an auto-scroller, which is always bad news for speedrunners. You ride on a green snake block that moves at a set speed throughout the whole level. This is obviously pretty slow, and runners found a way to skip a small section of it and save about 5 to 10 seconds. After the snake gets to this point, you can wall kick your way to where the checkpoint is, taking damage twice on the way, and then dying. This will reset Mario to the checkpoint upon entering the level, while moving the snake there as well. Unlike 9 years ago, this run would spark a comeback for NSMB, and it would only take 3 months for the record to be taken by American runner Coughing Rocks on November 25th, 2015, with a time of 24:24.
Yes! Yes! Oh my gosh, what's world record? I don't even know, I was so excited. I got a world record! I got a world record! Oh my gosh, I did it! I did it!
He managed to save time by having a cleaner run overall and also having a faster cycle on 1T compared to eWaller's run. Coughing's record would stand for 2 months until a player named My Little Walrus would demolish it on January 20th, 2016 with a time of 23:52, the first ever 23-minute run, beating the previous world record by over 30 seconds. How did he do it? Well, first, he obviously had much cleaner movement overall, especially in the late half of the game. Secondly, Walrus opted to do what is known as Shell Route. I mentioned earlier that runners get the Fire Flower, as it's a faster way to go through the gauntlet. In this run though, Walrus keeps the shell up until 8-8. In context of the run's earlier eras, routing had a heavy emphasis on safety, because playing risky could cause you to lose your shell, what you'd normally be using through most of the run, and losing that makes you extremely vulnerable to enemies you'd otherwise be breezing past. Ideally, in a situation where you're holding right to run, not being in a shell would almost always be faster, but it's also a lot tougher to deal with maneuvering late game without the safety of being morphed into a shell, so Walrus decided keeping it for a while longer to get him more completed runs and a higher chance of getting the record would be worth it. Anyway, with Walrus beating such a huge world record, it's no surprise that it took about 10 months for him to beat it. Unlike what you might expect though, he once again beat a world record by a significant margin, this time by 20 seconds, with a final time of 23:32. With a combination of riskier unmorphs and riskier play in general, he was able to save a lot of time. He also did what seems to be a double jump in the middle of the air completely by accident in 8.5, which runners thought might be worth looking into. After some investigation into it by various people, including the task community, it was discovered that when Mario's vertical velocity is exactly at 0, releasing the shell state by releasing the run button causes Mario to jump. It's not entirely known why this happens yet, but it's likely related to confusing the game into thinking Mario is on the ground. Regardless though, the jump was replicable, and a good use was actually found for it. In the level 8-2, you generally have to cross over this entire section of barrels in order to raise the water levels to reach the pipe that takes you to the next section of the level. As you may have guessed though, you can perform the shell jump and get enough height to make it up without having to raise the water. This trick saves about 7 to 7.5 seconds, so runners would have a big time save to look forward to, if it wasn't for the fact that the trick was frame perfect. In addition to the fact that there's only one frame when Mario's Y velocity is 0 to perform the trick, if you don't set up the jump properly, it's possible that Mario's vertical velocity will never hit 0, making the trick impossible. In addition, there's not a specific way to set up the jump. It's just more of a feel thing. Needless to say, I don't want to understate how difficult this trick is. It was simply not viable in a real-time full game run. Just over a year would pass until the next world record would be set, on December 9th, 2017. This run was completed in 23 minutes and 29 seconds by I Love SMB, and as with other runs, movement optimizations would give him the edge over the previous run. One of these is known as Psycho Skip. The trick involves getting into the shell after running to slide underneath a 1-block gap to skip a cycle, as the name suggests, which saves around 3.5 seconds. The trend would continue when Walrus took back the record on March 14th, 2018, with a final time of 23:28.
Nice. Pretty sure that was it. Man, that run was terrible.
A few months later, on May 17th, he would drop his time again, but this time with a new strat to show off. Remember how in Coughing's run he hit a faster cycle of 1T? Well, there's another cycle above that, only done in tool-assisted speedruns at that point, aptly called Task Cycle. It involves jumping through the first set of moving platforms before they close, and it saves about 7 seconds off the previous fast cycle. It's also extremely difficult due to a very small margin of error. A few months would pass, and on July 19th, 2018, a runner named Moisenwa would set a new world record, beating Walrus by a second with a 23:15. This run was important as it revived the Fire Flower route. While Walrus valued consistency, Wa valued high-risk, low-reward movement. With the game getting more and more optimized, it was inevitable that runners would have to do harder and harder strats for less and less time save, and he knew that. With that said, as I mentioned before, Fire Route was faster, but the movement with the shell was easier and more consistent, so Wa opted for the faster strategy. A week later, he would drop his time down by 1 more second.
Oh, I did it. I fucking did it. Oh, let's go.
In this run, he utilized a strategy known as fire hops. In 8-7, there's these ledges you have to grab onto and slowly climb across. However, with well-timed fireball throws, you can actually cancel the ledge grab animation, allowing you to jump off the ledge. At the time when the trick was new, they were a bit inconsistent, but over time, this would become much easier. With all these large gaps from world record to world record, it was obvious that while runs were still very impressive, there were quite a few mistakes happening in runs. With this run though, the era of optimization essentially comes to a close. From here on out, every single second matters. But despite everything explained before, there was still something in the way that was making runners reset almost 70% of their runs. Towards the beginning of the video, I mentioned how runners needed to get the blue shell from the red question mark block in 1-2, and about half of runs would reset right after incorrect block movement, and 4 out of 14 runs would be reset due to an incorrect item. While I kind of breezed over it, this was still a major problem the run had, and resulted in tons of runners' time being lost just trying to get past 1-2. People spent hours doing runs that would never get past a minute and a half in. Because of how big of a problem this was, runner 3 Zach M would begin researching how RNG, a key component in determining luck, in NSMB works in February of 2018, in the hopes of finding a way to consistently manipulate it. Now, I'm going to be simplifying this a lot, and if you want more information, there will be a link in the description. But essentially, each DS has its own starting RNG value that can be set to a value unique to that DS by changing its date and time, and manipulated throughout the first level by doing a certain amount of double jumps that again is unique to each DS's and runner's setup, in order to set the RNG value to one that moves the red question mark block to the left and makes it drop a shell. While it is possible to manipulate RNG farther, it's not viable to do while still going as fast as possible. So since the date and time were involved, cues would have to be involved in order to determine when to start the game at what time, so that runners would know exactly what value they were manipulating each time and so that it could be consistent. The cues were pretty inconsistent themselves, but eventually, a cue found by AndreMH would remove most of the inconsistency. Essentially, the toads that run out of the castle during the cutscene at the beginning of the game change patterns based on the starting RNG value. There are about 2 to 13 distinct patterns that can vary per DS, and if memorized, runners can know if they are on a value that will work or not, and reset earlier than just seeing if the block will move to the direction they want it to, or if it will drop the item they want it to. So that is essentially how RNG is manipulated in NSMB. I went through it pretty quickly, but months of research from the community resulted in this, something that would change how the game could be ran forever. Runners didn't have to worry about resetting a majority of their runs anymore due to Shell RNG, and instead focus on optimizing the late game. With this new era of NSMB speedrunning underway, a race for a 22-minute run would finally begin. The race for 22 begins with Wah beating his own record once again on July 31st, 2018 with a final time of 23:05.
Oh, I got the fucking record. Oh.
This would be the first world record using RNG manipulation, and combined with some extremely clean movement throughout, he was able to cut 9 seconds off of his previous time. A couple of months would pass until Wah would beat his record again, finishing a run with a time of 23:03 on November 18th, 2018. With a new method of getting task cycle that brought up consistency by quite a bit, and a cleaner World 5 Ghost House, he brought 2 seconds off of his time. It should be noted that this run did have potential to be the first 22, however he lost about 3 seconds in 8.6, lost 2 seconds in 8.8 due to bad Meteor RNG, and lost 2 seconds in Bowser's Castle due to nerves. It was obvious that a 22 was possible, and it could happen any day now, but it would not be easy. I mentioned RNG in 8.8 losing Wah some time, but there's much more RNG throughout the run at this point that would affect runs massively. A big one is moving objects on the world maps. Every time a level is completed and Mario returns to the world map, there are 2 objects that move around the map. 2 red blocks in World 1, and in Worlds 5 and 8, a red block and a hammer bro. If you're unlucky enough, these movements can pile up, and you could lose anywhere from just a few seconds up to 20 seconds. In World 1, the fluctuation is pretty minimal. In World 5, the optimal pattern is very hard to get, and World 8 is almost 50-50 on if you'll lose a little or a lot of time. And the run was getting to a point where these few seconds mattered a lot. But unlike the Shell in 1-2, you can't feasibly manipulate RNG this far into the game while still going as fast as possible. An infamous instance of this actually happening is the first 23-minute run. In World 8, Walrus lost about 10 seconds due to an object crossing the long bridge between the first half of the world and Gauntlet 5 times, which has a less than 1% chance of happening. Another notorious RNG moment in the run is known as Death Stare. At the end of Bowser's Castle, where you fight Bowser Jr. and Bowser, it can take Jr. either 1.5, 0.75, or 0 seconds to recognize that you were there and actually start the fight. This was believed to be pure RNG and totally uncontrollable. The point is, this uncontrollable RNG is starting to become a big factor in runs. While 10 seconds back when Walrus got the first 23 wasn't too big of a deal, now it's become a massive chunk of time, and runners would start losing countless records and PBs to something they could do nothing about. In the race for 22, an American runner named Yiply would show himself off as a serious contender for it when he got a 23:01.933 on January 19, 2019, beating the previous record set by Wah by 2 seconds. Yiply opts to use Luigi in this run, who can be played by pressing A on the file select screen to start a new file while holding L and R. Unlike in other Mario games, Luigi controls the exact same as his brother and provides no advantages other than looking cool. One notable new strategy in the run though is completing 5-3 a little bit quicker by doing some more difficult unmorphs in order to avoid the fireworks. Before this, runners would just go through the level a little bit slower in order to avoid the firework sequence, because completing a level with the last 2 digits of the in-game time being the same, for example 266, causes a fireworks show that loses about 13 seconds on average, although it varies depending on where in the world map you are, and which digits you get on the timer. This run was also set just minutes before a biannual New Super Mario Bros. Series relay race while in a call with all the top runners, and he was on 22 pace until... Regardless though, he still got his first world record in his hands, and he would go on to break it twice more. The first time a few weeks later on January 31st, 2019 with a final time of 23:01.1. And the second time on February 23rd with a final time of 23.8, in a run that might have gotten 22 if not for the second long death stare from Bowser Jr.
I don't know, 22 might be there, might not. No, the 1 second delay. Ah, okay.
With the run only 0.8 of a second away from 22 minutes, it was inevitable that the day would come soon. But who would do it? Yiply had been on a tear, and Wah was still in the running. Even Walrus had the skill, though he wasn't actively trying to lower the record at the time. Outside of previous world record holders, the other runners in contention for the first 22 were Greg LVK, a French 100% runner trying his hand at any percent at the time, and AndreMH, a Japanese runner who had a lot of skill with individual level or IL runs. March 5th, 2019 would be the day the barrier was finally broken. It cannot be understated how difficult of a barrier this was to break. Between how optimized movement was getting in the game and how little room there was for bad RNG, the 22-minute run was hundreds of thousands of attempts in the making between all runners combined. In the end though, Japan would prevail. AndreMH would be the first person to beat New Super Mario Bros. In under 23 minutes, with a final time of 22:58.467. Just to contextualize how important good movement is becoming at this point, the run lost about 4 to 5 seconds from Bad World 5 and early World 8 RNG. As I said earlier in the video, this can vary a lot, but at this point, even good movement can't save losing runs to bad RNG. However, with the clean 1T and just cleaner movement overall, Andre was able to pull this off. He also brought out a trick from a task known as 5-3 hyperspeed. Essentially, throwing a Koopa shell on a slope and then cutting off the animation by jumping puts Mario in a glitched shell state that is much faster than normal running speed, though the momentum can only be retained by frame-perfect jumps on flat ground, or more lenient jumps on slopes. That glitch, in conjunction with the fact that 5-3 has a massive drop at the beginning, made it realistic to replicate in a real-time setting and save time. While it looks relatively easy, the timing is strange and there are many weird inputs involved, making it pretty tricky. With the first 22 in the books, the runners already had their sights on the first 22-minute and 40-second run. The first runner to get closer to that boundary than Andre was Wah, getting a 22:58.3 about a week after Andre got his record. He lost around the same amount of time from RNG as Andre did, but had some better movement in some parts in order to just barely get the record back. Wah wasn't the only runner who wanted his record back though. Yiply would strike back on April 27th of 2019.
Yes! Yes! Woo! World record! Let's go! See that one? Let's go!
Another month later, on May 26th, a runner who goes by the name Pidgey would get himself a run of 22:54.367. Unfortunately though, this run was not verified and put on official leaderboards because of some capture card issues throughout the run. While this was the case, it's still believed to be legitimate because Pidgey had done many high-level runs before and was definitely capable of getting such a time. So while it was never an official world record, runners would keep this in mind as a target. And so, despite his bad luck, Pidgey would have a shot at redemption. But unfortunately, while on 22.4x pace out of 8 castle, he missed a fireball in 8.7 that led to him losing his fire flower. It should briefly be mentioned that Pidgey's time on the splits are different because he runs the game on Wii U Virtual Console. Loads are faster on DS than VC, but the loads are inconsistent. As a result, sub-24 runs are retimed by swapping out VC fadeouts with DS's for more accurate timing, and roughly 46 to 47 seconds are added onto the run. So, his best possible time being 22:02 actually equates to 22:49. Unfortunately, Pidgey's luck was not on his side. What he didn't know though, was that this run would be the start of one of the craziest weeks in speedrunning history. That same day, only 6 hours later, Pidgey would finally catch a break, completing his first official world record with a final time of 22:57.367. Over Yiply's previous world record, the RNG in this run was better overall, and he did 5-3 hyperspeed, which Yiply neglected to do. He did unfortunately lose 1.5 seconds to Death Stare and took this unfortunate hit in 8T before regaining the shell in 8.3, but still managed to beat the record by exactly 1 frame. But Pidgey couldn't stay comfortable for long. You can't see it in this video because there's no splits on screen, but a runner that goes by the name Glitchman24 was on pace for a category defining 22:53, and then in 8.8,
No! Ah, that sucks.
a meteor came down right over the invisible star block at exactly the moment he jumped to hit it, causing him to lose the star and the world record. After failing Death Warp in 8T2, Glitch threw his DS down in anger. But he didn't give up.
Yes! Oh my god! Yes! I finally did it.
After a little over an hour and a half of playing, Glitch would get his first world record with a final time of 22:56.033, beating Pidgey's first record only 4 hours after he set it by a little over a second thanks to some better movement, not getting hit, and better 8.8 RNG. This run was pretty clean, so it must stand for a while, right? Nope, this momentum would not stop just yet.
Yes, I did it! Yes! Yes! Let's go! Screw you, Glitch. Screw you, Pidgey. I'm back on top!
A bit over a day later, Yiply would come back to take his record back and get in on the week's action, dropping it down to 22:54.833. However, his message to Glitch would not go unheard.
Holy crap.
Just 6 hours after Yiply set his new record, Glitch was on another good run. Despite what was a bad 8 tower, losing him nearly 5 seconds, Glitch's superior movement through 8-6 in Bowser's Castle allowed him to take his record back with a final time of 22:54.8, clutching out yet another world record beaten exactly by 1 frame. However, he was not done.
Yes! 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 I never have to play this game again!
Glitch would set the 5th and final world record of this week, breaking his previous one by 2 seconds with a final time of 22:52.133 on only the 3rd attempt of the day. During the short span of 5 days, runners managed to drop the time down by an entire 5 seconds with no new major strategies. All it took was an insane amount of competition and willpower. With the week of records over, it would take about a month for a new record to be set. In that time, Yiply got close to taking the record back from Glitch, but made this mistake in Bowser's Castle.
Was that? What the f was that? Where was my down press?
He still finished the run with a time of 22:52.3, but missed the record by a bit over a tenth of a second. I mentioned this run because it almost broke the world record, but also because it was the first real-time run to implement something known as QSG, or Quick Slide Glitch. I say real-time run because it was something that the task community had known about since 2011, but due to the lack of communication between the task community and the real-time run community over the years, the latter had believed it wouldn't be possible to recreate due to the task file allegedly having left and right inputs used simultaneously, something you cannot do with physical hardware. However, a tasker named Tedder had pointed out to them that those inputs were not necessary for the trick, prompting Yiply to try it, and discovering that it did in fact work. Essentially, QSG is a glitch that allows you to have the speed of being unmorphed while actually being morphed, giving you the shell's benefit of being able to body enemies. This is done by pressing down during the first 3 frames of falling off an edge while running at almost full speed, but not at full speed exactly. This is most useful in 1-2 and 5-2 because you can get unmorph speeds where you previously weren't able to. It saves about half a second in 1-2 and about a second and a half in 5-2. As a total decompilation of the game's code has not been attempted to this day, the exact reason for why this glitch works has remained unknown. On August 12, 2019, Pidgey would come back with another world record and a final time of 22:50.467. In addition to QSG in 1-2 and 5-2, it was also discovered you could do it in 1T for about a quarter of a second time save. While that was a little discovery, this run included something else new that would be big for the future of the game's speedrunning: Miko Manip. Discovered by a runner named Miko, this manipulation essentially makes what was an infamous RNG moment of the run obsolete: Death Stare. Here's Miko's original message about the matter. I've been messing around with the Bowser Stare manip on and off for about the past month or 2. It started out as a joke, and I think I may be onto something. I seem to get no stare 100% of the time. I've only tested it 10 to 20 times. If I scroll the screen all the way to the left and do 3 full jumps, one from near the starting spawn, the next onto the slightly raised platform, and the last one onto the bridge. Basically, scrolling the screen all the way to the left for some reason caused no stare. But why? Well, it seems that Dry Bowser's shaking head, which is on a cycle, is the real culprit for Death Stare. This had been known for a while, but manipulating it seemed impossible, and Miko proved that wrong. While Miko says they had 100% consistency with the trick, it seems that only about 80% of the time you will get no Death Stare, and the other 15% you will only get the 0.75 second Death Stare. It was also later discovered that the triple jump doesn't make a significant difference. Testing showed that 23 out of 30 times no Death Stare happened without the triple jump. Not much can be said from it since the total number of trials is small, but it seems that it may have little to no impact on the manipulation. So with that, one of the bigger RNG portions of the run had essentially been eliminated, which is great news in what is a very RNG heavy run. Finally, on August 16, 2019, the first 22-minute and 40-second run would be completed by Glitch, with a final time of 22:49.383. With what was an absolutely crazy past 5 months filled with fierce competition, Glitch was able to win the race to the next big barrier for the run. The amount that the community was able to accomplish in such a short time was nothing short of astonishing, especially with how optimized the run already was. Only a few weeks later, Glitch would beat his own record by a huge amount, finishing a run with a time of 22:44.533 on September 6th.
Yes! 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 Oh my god.
Yeah, how does it feel that like nobody will ever beat your
I
You
feel
basically have world record for the
How
rest
does
of
it
the
feel to
time.
degen that much?
How could he beat such an optimized record by what was so much at this point? Well, remember at the beginning of the video when I mentioned a trick so difficult it would never be attempted in a full game, real-time run? Glitch thought it was time to change that.
Oh my god, dude. I can't, man. I know I'm not even in Gauntlet yet, but it's like, I just can't handle it, dude.
Yeah, the shell jump that was considered too difficult to be used for an any percent run or any real-time run at all was finally implemented. With how optimized the controllable parts of the game were getting, it was inevitable that in order to beat out possibly bad RNG, runners would have to start implementing insanely difficult tricks from task runs. The obvious first choice here seemed to be the shell jump in 8.2 all the way back in 2016, deemed fast 8.2 by the community because of the huge amount of time it saved, nearly 8 seconds. This trick combined with really good RNG meant that a 22-minute and 30-second time was possible in the near future. But don't let that lead you to believe that this run was going to be easy to beat. The RNG in World 5 and 8 was solid, and other than some slip-ups here and there and some bad 8.8 Meteor RNG, this run was going to be really difficult to beat. Oh, and to add on to this difficulty, the only realistic way to beat this run with the strats at the time is to do fast 8.2. On March 29th, 2020, SpicyNoodles, a runner from the UK, would be on pace for a world record. Unfortunately for him, tragedy struck at the end of 8.3, costing him the world record. However, this wouldn't be the last we'll see from him. On April 28th, 2020, Noodles would get the first world record for the UK with a final time of 22:40.667. In combination with a second try fast 8.2, Noodles overall just performed what was a very clean version of Glitch's previous record, in addition to a bit better RNG in World 5, and with a 22-minute and 30-second run on the cusp of happening. Noodles would be the first to break the barrier with a 22:39.850 on July 18th, 2020. While this record was overall amazing, it's a good one to use to really try and put into context how wildly map object movement can affect a run. While watching through the run, there's some very minor slip-ups throughout. Not a ton more than in any normal run, but what's important is that there were arguably more in this run than in his previous record. While he did have some time saves in other places that helped him to gain time on these mistakes, such as a really good ghost house in World 5, first try fast 8.2, and a really clean 8.6, he also got really good RNG in World 5. While it can't really be said whether RNG was the deciding factor of this run beating his last one by a little under a second, I bring it up to make the point that a run with perfect movement and bad RNG can be completed in the same amount of time as a run with lots of mistakes and great RNG. Not to say that either of these runs had perfect or bad movement. A few weeks would pass until the next record would be set by Glitch, with a final time of 22:37.033.
Oh my god. I hate the British.
That's the best ever gold for World 5 also.
Yeah, that definitely is.
This run had notably amazing World 5 RNG, almost theoretically perfect in fact. Additionally, Glitch included the main time saves available in this run, and we can take a look at them to see how much wiggle room runners had in the future. He says that he can save 0.75 seconds in 1T, 1.5 seconds in 5.3 with more frame perfect jumps, 1 second in 8.2, 1 second in 8.3, half a second in 8.6, half a second in 8.8 with better Meteor RNG, although he notes that it was still very clean, 1.5 seconds at the very end because of map object RNG, and 1 second in Bowser's Castle. With this, we can guess that overall, Glitch lost about 7.75 seconds in total with movement and RNG combined. This just goes to show you how difficult a record in this category has become when you're only losing about 8 seconds over 22.5 minutes, and that's why it would take another few months until January 21st, 2021 for the next record to be set. Noodles would come back with the first world record of 2021 with a final time of 22:35.833. A better 1T in 8.6, along with better World 8 RNG than Glitch, he was able to take back his record. A few new strats also helped out. First, a new way of doing 8 Castle was discovered by Wah. By crouching off this platform into the gap instead of crouch jumping from the lower platform into it, you can save about 0.75 seconds. It's pretty tight though, because you need to land in a specific spot on the top platform and do a crouch on the last 3 frames of it so you don't fall too quickly. Secondly, in Bowser's Castle, Noodles found that you can do a wall kick in this room when small, saving about 0.5 seconds. He says that he plans on running other categories, but thinks that with current strats, a 22:33 is reasonable. Luckily, a new strategy would be implemented, and like Fast 8.2, was really difficult, but would save a lot of time. Okay, rewind back to 2016 when the shell jump was discovered. I mentioned that runners found a use with an 8.2 for the strategy due to the level's vertical nature, but it was way too difficult to be implemented at the time. Well, another use of the trick was found in 8T2, one that could be considered Fast 8.2's dark sibling. A trick that instead of having 1 frame perfect input far into the run, had 2 frame perfect inputs even farther into the run. One so difficult that runners didn't even start considering it useful until 2021. What is such a trick called? Q-warp. So what makes this trick double frame perfect? It looks essentially the same as Fast 8.2, just in a different level. Well, first, let's take a closer look at 8.2. To get a shell jump in an isolated situation, you have to release the jump button in the 1 frame window that Mario's vertical velocity is 0, as I explained before, and then unmorph when his Y velocity does reach 0. However, there is a little more going on in the case of 8.2. When watching runners do the trick, it may seem like they are manually unmorphing by releasing the down button, which has to be held to morph into the shell when Mario isn't at running speed, because at full speed Mario will automatically morph, which he isn't in 8.2 or 8T2. When you crouch in the shell with some horizontal speed, in case of 8.2 that's to the left, and then hold the opposite direction in the air, in this case to start moving to the right, Mario automatically unmorphs. So this means all that has to be timed in the case of 8.2 is releasing A in order to get the space jump. In the case of 8T2 though, you're only moving in one direction, meaning that Mario doesn't unmorph automatically. Additionally, I explained earlier that it's not guaranteed that in every single jump, Mario will hit a 0Y velocity. This isn't a huge problem in 8.2 as the trick can be attempted multiple times without much of a loss, but in 8T2, there's only one shot at getting the trick due to the layout of the level, and missing it meant certain death. This would leave the trick down to essentially RNG. However, it was discovered that if you release the jump button exactly 5 frames before the peak of your jump so that you stop accelerating upwards, you will be guaranteed to hit 0Y velocity. That's the first frame perfect input. After that, at the peak of Mario's jump, you must release the down button on the D-pad in order to unmorph on the exact frame you hit 0Y velocity, which is what is automatically done for you in 8.2, making it a double frame perfect trick that has to be performed in a 4-frame window. If that doesn't make this trick sound extremely difficult, I don't know what does. However, with it providing 8 seconds of time save over the old Death Warp, it was the logical next step for runners to take if they want to save any more significant amounts of time. At this point, while it was proven to be possible in real time, barely any runners were bothered to do it in a full run. To do a run-killing trick 19 minutes into a 22-minute run was insane, and world records were still possible without it. That didn't stop an insane Canadian runner named JDude from trying it though. With a great stroke of luck and a ton of talent, he was able to complete a run in 22:33.7 with the trick. So while this run didn't save as much time as it could have due to some pretty major time losses in other places, it definitely is a big contributor to him actually getting the record. And that is the most recent world record set for New Super Mario Bros. It seems at the moment that Q-Warp is the future of the speedrun, but as I said before, almost nobody is implementing it. Only 2 runners have completed runs with Q-Warp in it, JDude and Glitch. Very attentive viewers may have also noticed the bigger ripples that Q-Warp has on the speedrun, and that is actually the return of the shell route. Because a shell is required to do a space jump, it's necessary to carry it through the gauntlet all the way to 8T2. While this might seem nice, as shell route used to be the more consistent way to go, with complicated QSGs and other new strategies, it actually seems to be the more difficult option nowadays. After some comparisons were done between fire route and shell route, it was found that with an ideal gauntlet section and a successful Q-Warp, you could save 7.5 seconds over fire route. However, if you have an ideal gauntlet section and do not do Q-Warp, you lose 1.5 seconds over fire route. This will be an interesting future to the run, as top runners will have to switch to learning optimal shell route strategies throughout gauntlet, as they've been doing fire route the whole time, and new runners that have to start the game will also have to learn multiple new and different strategies as their skills evolve, even more than their predecessors would have had to before. With what is already undeniably a difficult speedrun that relies a lot on unbelievable amounts of skill and luck, adding Q-Warp to the equation adds an entirely new level of difficulty. As with any speedrun, it's inevitable the game will get optimized to a point where Q-Warp is necessary for world record, and we will start to see tons of run getting killed 19 minutes in, and it's coming sooner than you think. Some would argue it's already at that point. Overall, it's going to take insanely talented runners to push this game further and further. The talent pool for the new Super Mario Bros. Series is already surprisingly massive, with some of the best speedrunners out there invested in making these games as optimized as possible. The game isn't as active as it once was, and only a few top runners are attempting to get world record with Q-Warp. If we're being completely honest here, the future of the game is uncertain at the moment. How far will runners take it before the movement is so good that the run will rely solely on good RNG? Or will Q-Warp prove to be such a massive barrier that the game will never get to that point? That is a story that's up to you to write.